So I'm going to double click and make a new texture, and I'm going to take that texture and I'm going to drop it onto my cube. Okay, and now it's a slightly lighter gray than it was before. Okay, then I'm going to double click on the material. Okay, and I'm going to rename this one color. Okay, because we'll start out with the color channel because that one is the sort of the most important for a lot of the jobs that you're going to do. Okay, so I have my color channel. We also have reflectance on down here. So I'm going to point you guys to reflectance first. Okay, there is something called default specular on. This is sort of a legacy thing that has been, they keep it there. It's essentially a fake highlight. So if you see this preview here of the black sphere, and you can see that there's a little bit gray halo that's happening right at this high point of the object, this is the fake highlight. So if you turn off that default specular, okay, you'll see that it will then get rid of that shiny spot. Okay, and if you could see over here, what that does is it makes it a little bit more matte. Okay, now the reason I mention this is because it is a fake highlight, so later on when you want to actually make it reflective yourself, it tends to get in the way. The other reason is that if you're trying to create a texture that's not shiny and you just want to make like a flat matte color that you're putting onto your object and you're not thinking about that you want it to be like a shiny plastic or something like that, this also gets in the way. So it can be quite annoying. Again, it's sort of a legacy thing, so if you forget to do your reflectance, you do get a little bit of a highlight, but it's not exactly accurate. It doesn't, I don't think it looks good most of the time, so it's something to watch out for. So right now what I'm going to do is actually just turn off the reflectance channel, and then we'll come back to it in a little while. Okay, so the only thing I have checked on is color. Okay, so I'm in the color channel. I know because the color channel is highlighted. Okay, and I go over here, and the top section is going to be usually a color spectrum that you can switch between to adjust the color. You have a brightness setting, and then you have this thing called texture down here. Okay, texture is how you can add patterns or how you could load a photo from outside of Cinema 4D, import it in here, and apply it to your object. So we'll go through all of that with color. That's the big one that we're going to tackle. So we'll do color together. We're going to do reflectance and transparency, bump. I'll try and squeeze displacement in today, and luminance. Whatever we don't cover, I'm going to update the Blackboard to have those materials included so that you know what everything is doing. Okay, so if I want to change the color, you can come over here. Mine is on hue, saturation, and value. That's what the HSV stands for. You could switch that to RGB if you preferred, but I think this is going to be more intuitive for people. They'll be used to seeing the full color spectrum, so you can leave it on that, but these little icons up here will let you basically decide how you want to select colors. It's basically different color sliders. Okay, this up here is the actual color that you're creating. This is the swatch. If you choose the color picker, you end up in the same interface as you do here. It's like a pop-up window. So that's if you're thinking like Photoshop, that you could click on it and you could get a different sort of color picker. That's not what's going to do that for you up here. This is just a preview of the color that you're basically mixing. Okay, you do have an eyedropper. That's nice. If you want to pick a color from, like the green up here of the extrude, you could do that. If you need to write the number in yourself, like say from Photoshop, you can get the hexadecimal number and you could type it in here. So again, if you're in another program like Photoshop or Illustrator or InDesign and you need to use the same colors that you have there, you could copy and paste those codes into here, and you don't have to worry about recreating it. But if you're just sort of mixing it yourself here, then you could grab your sliders, And basically the first slider is going to be you looking for, you know, if you're saying, okay, I want to do like a aqua blue, you could stick the slider right in the middle there. The second slider is going to be sort of how saturated that color is going to be. More gray to the left, more pure color to the right, and then the value underneath that is going to be you shifting whether you want this. It's going to look like whether you want it to be a darker color or a lighter color. So again, if you want it to be very bright, you tend to pull all of these sliders for the second and the third one towards the far right. Okay. Say you wanted to create pure white. You would go in here and you would want to grab your slider, and you would want to make sure that this is pushed all the way to the far end. Okay, and this one I want to make sure if it was on this side, obviously it will be super blue, but if I'm on this side, then there's no saturation for the color. So now I have sort of a pure white texture. So, and that helps. That's something that you'll probably find yourself needing every once in a while, because you're going to want like a flat white texture to put on, like say a background. This is something that you'll sort of revisit here. So you can make white like this, or you can come here and again, if you're not sort of comfortable with a lot of the hexadecimal codes, all the code in capital letter F here, that's the code for white. So six F's in a row, you'll get white. So if you don't feel like mixing this here, you can just always type that in over there. Okay, so you whatever colors you want, you can come in here, say I want like green screen green. I go pick the range I want from the first slider. The second one I decide how much of that green I want, and then the third slider I can decide if I want to darken it up or something like that. Okay, and you'll see that it's changing in multiple places. My preview is changing here in the material editor. It's changing over here in the perspective window. It's changing down here and up there in the icons. So you should see feedback happening all across the workspace. Okay, so I have my green texture now, and I've applied it to my shape. Okay, now underneath it you have brightness. You can turn that off at 0, and you will get a black texture and no color. You could make that 100%, which is normally what it's on, or you could adjust it if you want to give it a little bit, you want to darken it up, you don't want it to be so bright. You can adjust this here instead of necessarily changing the color using the value. That's going to shift the color space, but this will just make it basically darker or lighter. So similar, but sometimes they'll look pretty different. Okay, and I'm pretty sure you can go past 100. So this is 200. You can see it's starting to get really bright. So if I do something like 500%, it's going to be super overexposed. But you can see that actually gets me like this kind of bright yellow highlight. So that's also sort of an interesting effect that happens when you start messing with the brightness. So even though it looks like it only goes from 0 to 100%, you can go past 100. Okay. As a note for the future, it's one of the first things we'll do when we animate is, I've mentioned this before, but I want to remind you guys, anytime you see these little dials, you can animate those. So if you wanted to have something change color, and you want it to start out green and you want it to fade to blue, that's something you can animate. If you wanted to have it start out bright green and then you wanted it to go black, you could animate this one as well. So anywhere that you see this little light up dial, just know very soon in this class, in the next couple of weeks, we're going to be able to animate those kind of things, which is great. All right, so you can look forward to that. So notice when you go through the different material options, if you see those dials, again, keep it in the back of your mind that that's something that you're going to be able to animate coming up. Okay, so that's my basic setup for changing the color. It's very simple, thankfully, because it's something that you do a lot. And when you want to start out and you don't want to look at that default gray all the time, you can change the color and put a different color on it, and it makes things a little bit easier to see. Okay, so if nobody has any questions, I'm going to show you guys how to use the texture channel next. Okay, so everybody good so far? Anybody have any questions? So everybody was able to make a material and they were able to apply it to an object in their scene, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So then what I'll do is, I think, so we'll just keep moving along unless a problem comes up. Okay, so I'm gonna make a bunch of textures. I'll obviously share when I share the recorded lecture of this with you guys. I'll share my file as well, so you can look through all of the textures that I end up creating today. So I'm gonna make a bunch of them. So I'm just gonna start turning them on and off. So that you don't have to look at a lot of clutter, but I'm going to keep everything that I make. So I'm going to leave this one alone.